The house was too quiet. That was the first thing Nora noticed when she stepped inside, balancing 2 grocery bags against her hip as the door creaked shut behind her. No laughter. No clatter of dishes. No familiar voice calling her name from the kitchen. Just silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, uncomfortable kind that settles into your chest and refuses to move. Nora paused in the entryway listening. Nothing. She glanced at her phone. 6:42 p.m. Thanksgiving evening. She had imagined this moment differently. She always did. For weeks she had pictured warm lights glowing through the windows, the smell of roasted turkey filling the hallway, and her husband Ethan teasing her for being late, as usual. She imagined his mother bustling around the kitchen, his sister complaining about something trivial, and his stepfather sitting quietly in the corner, pretending not to be tired. A family gathering. A normal one. Instead, the house felt abandoned, like everyone had left in a hurry and forgotten to come back. "Nathan?" she called softly, setting the bags down. No answer. Her heart began to beat faster. She walked into the living room. The couch cushions were neatly arranged. No coats. No shoes by the door. The television was off. Even the framed family photos on the wall seemed to watch her with quiet judgment. Then she noticed the note. It was placed carefully on the dining table, folded once, her name written on the front in handwriting she knew too well. She unfolded it. "We had to leave earlier than planned. Everything is taken care of. Please look after Richard while we're gone. We'll explain later. Ethan." Her hands trembled. "Gone," she whispered. She read it again. And again. Where was gone? Her eyes moved to the calendar on the wall. A red circle around today reminded her of something Ethan had mentioned weeks ago, something she hadn't thought much about. A cruise. Her stomach dropped. She rushed toward the kitchen where the smell of cold, untouched food lingered faintly. The refrigerator was nearly empty. No preparations. No leftovers. No signs of a celebration that should have happened hours ago. Then she heard it. A soft cough. Nora turned sharply. In the corner of the room, partially hidden by shadow, sat Richard Hale, Ethan's stepfather. He looked smaller than she remembered. Thinner. A blanket draped over his legs, his hands resting on a cane. His eyes lifted slowly, meeting hers with an expression that wasn't surprised at all. "So," he said quietly, "you're the only one who came." Nora rushed toward him. "Richard. Oh my God. Why didn't anyone tell me you were here alone?" He gave a weak smile. "Because then you would have asked questions." Her chest tightened. "Where is everyone?" Richard exhaled slowly. "Halfway to the Caribbean by now." The words hit her like a slap. "They left?" she asked. "On Thanksgiving?" "With your husband's colleague," he added calmly. "A woman named Clara. You've met her, haven't you?" Nora felt dizzy. Ethan had mentioned Clara. Too casually. Too often. "And they left you here?" Nora asked, her voice shaking. Richard nodded. "They said you'd take care of me. Like always." For a moment Nora couldn't speak. Then anger surged through her confusion. This must be a mistake. Ethan wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Richard interrupted gently. "Abandon me? Lie to you? Use your savings?" Her head snapped up. "What do you mean?" Richard gestured toward a small folder on the side table. "You should sit down." Inside the folder were printed bank statements. Dates. Withdrawals. Transfers. Large ones. Nora's breath caught. "That's our joint account," she whispered. "Yes," Richard said. "Or it was." Her knees buckled as she sat. "They've been doing this for months," he continued. "Using the excuse of my care. Saying medical expenses were draining them. But most of it went to vacations. Hotels. Gifts. And the cruise." Nora asked. Richard's eyes softened. "Paid for with your savings." The room spun. At that moment, barely 2 minutes into the story, Nora understood something that would change everything. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was calculated. Before the shock could fully settle, Richard leaned forward slightly. "There's something you need to know," he said. "I didn't tell them everything." Nora looked up. "I'm not as helpless as they think," he continued. "And what they don't know is worth far more than what they stole." That was the moment the story shifted, from confusion to strategy, from victimhood to something far more dangerous. And before we go any further, thank you for being here, for listening to this story on Hidden Life Story. If stories of betrayal, hidden truths, and quiet justice keep you watching, subscribe, because what's coming next changes everything. Richard straightened the papers carefully. They think they've already won, he said. But they made one mistake. Nora swallowed. What mistake? They left you behind. And in that silence-filled house, with a dying man and a stolen future between them, an unexpected alliance was about to be born. The silence of the house had a sound of its own. Jade noticed it the moment the door shut behind her. A hollow quiet that pressed against her ears, like a held breath that had gone on too long. The heater clicked weakly, struggling against the November cold, and somewhere deep in the walls, a pipe knocked twice, then stopped. The air smelled faintly of dust, antiseptic, and something else she couldn't place at first. Loneliness, maybe. Or neglect. She set her overnight bag down by the staircase and stood still, listening. "Victor?" she called again, softer this time. "Kitchen," came the reply. Steady. Clear. Too clear for a man Brady had described as barely aware anymore. Jade followed the voice. Victor sat at the small breakfast table near the window, wrapped in a thick gray cardigan. His frame was frail, there was no denying that. But his posture was upright, his eyes alert behind wire-rimmed glasses. A half-finished cup of tea rested beside a neat stack of papers, aligned with almost obsessive precision. "You're earlier than I expected," he said, studying her face. Jade forced a smile. "I drove straight from work. I thought everyone would be here." Victor let out a quiet, humorless breath. "Yes. So did I." That was the moment, the exact second, when Jade understood that whatever had happened was not an oversight. It was a decision. She pulled out the chair across from him, and Saturday, they left a note. Victor nodded once. On the counter. Elaine's handwriting. "Yes. She always dots her I's with little circles," he said. "Even when she's being cruel." Jade swallowed. "They went on a cruise." "So they did. With Hannah." Victor's mouth tightened, not in surprise but in confirmation. "Of course." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning Jade didn't yet understand. "I don't get it," she said. "Brady told me this week that the trip was cancelled. That his mother wasn't feeling well. He said we'd all be together." Victor reached for the papers beside him but didn't hand them over yet. "Brady has a particular talent," he said calmly. "He lies best when he believes the lie serves a greater purpose." Jade felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "What purpose is that?" Victor finally slid one sheet across the table. It was a bank statement. Jade glanced down casually, then froze. The balance at the bottom of the page was almost zero. "That can't be right," she whispered. Victor watched her carefully, as though measuring how much truth she could bear at once. "Check the withdrawals." Her fingers trembled as she scanned the entries. Large transfers. Multiple charges. Airline tickets. A cruise line she recognized instantly from the brochures Brady had once shown her, just for fun. "This is our joint account," she said. "We were saving for a house." "Yes," Victor replied. "You were." The room tilted. Jade pressed her palm flat against the table, grounding herself. "He took everything?" she asked. "Nearly," Victor said. "Left just enough so the account wouldn't trigger an automatic fraud alert." A sharp laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "He planned this." Victor's gaze softened, not with pity but with something closer to respect. "Months ago." Jade looked up, stunned. "You knew." "I suspected," he corrected. "And then I confirmed." He pushed the rest of the stack toward her. Medical appointment logs. Prescription records. Care schedules with glaring gaps highlighted in yellow. Notes written in precise, almost elegant handwriting. "Victor," her voice broke. "Why didn't you say anything?" He leaned back, the effort visible now in the way his shoulders sagged. "Because no one listens to a dying old man until it's convenient." Jade shook her head. "That's not true." Victor smiled faintly. "You're kind to say that. But kindness and action rarely arrive together." She flipped through the documents, each page tightening the knot in her chest. Missed appointments. Reduced medication dosages. Notes indicating that Brady had insisted certain treatments were unnecessary expenses. This is abuse, she said hoarsely. Yes, Victor replied. It is. Silence fell again, thicker this time. Jade pushed the papers aside and met his eyes. Why show me this now? Victor studied her for a long moment. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing against wet pavement. Because, he said finally, you're the only one who didn't leave. The words landed harder than any accusation. Jade thought of the cruise ship, of Brady laughing on a sunlit deck, a glass in his hand, Hannah beside him. She imagined Elaine's satisfied smile. The way they would justify this later. The way they would expect forgiveness. What do you want from me? Jade asked quietly. Victor's answer was immediate. The truth. He reached for a small digital recorder on the table. Jade hadn't noticed it before. I've been documenting everything, he continued. Dates, conversations, financial movements, medical neglect. But I need a witness who is not blood. Someone the courts won't dismiss as emotionally compromised. Jade's heart pounded. You want me to testify? I want you to help me finish this, Victor said. Properly. She hesitated. And after? Victor's eyes sharpened. After I make sure Brady and Elaine never profit from what they've done. Jade's breath caught. You mean your will? Yes. 1,000 questions crowded her mind, but one rose above the rest. Why me? Victor's expression softened again. Because when you walked in tonight you called my name first. Not Brady's. Tears burned behind her eyes, surprising her with their sudden intensity. She stood abruptly and turned toward the window, embarrassed by the emotion. Outside, the sky had darkened fully, the streetlights casting pale halos onto the empty road. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, she said. Victor's voice was steady. Strength is not loud. It is persistent. He paused, then added, and you don't have to decide tonight. Jade wiped her eyes and faced him again. Yes, she said. I do. She walked back to the table, sat down and squared her shoulders. I'm in, she said. But we do this right. No shortcuts. Victor smiled, this time genuinely. Agreed. Before either of them could say more, Jade's phone buzzed on the table. A message from Brady. Having fun yet? Make sure Dad takes his meds. We'll talk when we're back. Jade stared at the screen. Then slowly she turned the phone face down. Looks like, she said evenly, we have work to do. Victor nodded. Indeed we do. And in the quiet house that remembered everything its inhabitants tried to forget, an alliance was born. One that would change all of their lives in ways none of them could yet imagine. The first night after the pact passed without sleep, Lala lay awake on the narrow guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned with a tired, uneven rhythm. Every creak of the house felt louder now, every shadow heavier. She kept replaying the conversation with Farhad. His steady voice, the way his eyes never wavered when he spoke of betrayal, not even when naming his own son. By dawn she understood something unsettling. This house was no longer just a place of abandonment. It was a crime scene. The smell of strong black tea drifted down the hallway around 6. Lala followed it to the kitchen, where Farhad sat wrapped in a wool cardigan, a leather-bound notebook open in front of him. His hands trembled slightly, not from weakness but from effort to remain precise. You're awake early, he said without looking up. I didn't really sleep, she replied honestly. Farhad nodded. Good. Neither did I. That usually means the truth is ready to come out. He gestured for her to sit. On the table lay not just the notebook but folders, thick color-coded, labeled with dates going back nearly 3 years. This, he said, tapping the notebook, is the first ledger. Lala frowned. Ledger. A record, Farhad said, of what they thought I wouldn't notice. He opened the first page. Neat handwriting filled every line. Dates, times, names, amounts. March 14th. Medication dosage reduced. Reason given. Doctor approved. No such approval documented. June 2nd. Appointment cancelled by Elaine. Claimed I was too tired. I was not informed. September 19th. Brady withdrew $18,400. Labeled home care expenses. No receipts. Lala felt her throat tighten. You wrote all this while you were sick? Farhad looked up at her then. His gaze was sharp, almost unsettling in its clarity. I wrote it because I was sick. When you are weak, people assume you are also stupid. He slid a bank statement toward her. Recognize this account? Lala did. Silly. It was theirs. The joint savings she and Naveed, no Brady, had built together for years. The account they promised never to touch without discussing it first. Her finger traced the numbers. Balance: $2,137.42. It had been over $70,000 last fall. Her chest burned. He told me it was untouched. Farhad's mouth curved, not into a smile but something colder. Lies are easier when spoken confidently. He opened another folder. Inside were copies of wire transfers, credit card statements, cruise confirmations. Caribbean. 2 weeks. Luxury cabin. Paid in full. Lala pushed her chair back abruptly and stood. He left me here. Her voice broke. She forced it steady. To care for you while they used our money to drink champagne on a ship. Farhad closed the notebook gently. Yes. Silence pressed in around them. Then Farhad said quietly, now comes the part where you decide whether you want to look away. She met his eyes. I don't. Good, he said. Because today we start organizing. By mid-morning, the dining room had transformed into a command center. Lala spread documents across the long wooden table, sorting them by category: medical neglect, financial exploitation, communication records. Her background in design, once used for wedding invitations and brand logos, now served a darker purpose. She scanned papers, labeled files, created timelines. Every hour revealed something worse. Voicemails where Brady sounded impatient, irritated that his father needed so much attention. Emails from Elaine complaining about medical bills while booking spa appointments. Prescription refills delayed. Equipment returned early. At one point Lala stopped breathing altogether. What is it? Farhad asked from his wheelchair near the window. She turned the laptop toward him. This transfer, $9,500. It says, in-home nursing. But the agency confirmed, no nurse was ever hired. Farhad closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them they were glassy but dry. They paid themselves, he said, for care they never gave. Lala swallowed hard. This is elder abuse. Yes, Farhad agreed. And fraud. The word hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Around noon the doorbell rang. Lala froze. Fear surged, irrational but sharp. For a split second she imagined Brady standing there, suntanned and smiling, pretending nothing had happened. But it was a woman in her late 60s, holding a covered dish. I'm Edith, she said kindly. From next door. I saw the lights on and thought, well, someone should check. Farhad straightened in his chair. Edith Peterson, he said warmly. You're a sight for sore eyes. Edith's gaze moved from Farhad to Lala, then back. Understanding flickered across her face. So they finally left you alone, did they? She said softly. Lala stiffened. You knew. Edith sighed and stepped inside. We all did. The neighbors, I mean. We saw things. Days when no one came. Nights when the lights stayed off. Your husband, she hesitated. He was never around when it mattered. Farhad's fingers tightened on the armrest. Edith placed the dish on the counter. I brought soup. And, if you need someone to talk to or to tell the truth when it counts, I'm here. After she left, the house felt different. Less silent. Less alone. Lala turned to Farhad. She's a witness. Yes, he said quietly. And not the only one. That afternoon, Farhad asked her to retrieve a small locked box from the study closet. Inside were deeds, trust documents, and a single business card. Patricia Winters, estate attorney. I haven't called her yet, Farhad said. I wanted to be sure. About you. Lala looked up. Sure of what? That you wouldn't disappear once you knew the truth. She met his gaze, steady. I'm still here. Farhad nodded once. Decision made. As evening fell, Lala stood alone by the window, watching snow begin to dust the street. Her phone buzzed. A message from Brady. Hope everything's okay. Dad behaving? We'll talk when we're back. He stared at the screen, then turned the phone face down. Behind her, Farhad spoke, his voice calm but resolute. Tomorrow, he said, we make this official. Lala exhaled slowly. She had come home expecting a holiday. Instead she had stepped into a reckoning. And somewhere far away, on a cruise ship lit with gold and music, the people who thought they had already won had no idea. The ledger had just been opened. By the fourth morning the house no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied by truth. Morning light crept through the thin curtains of the guest room where Lydia had barely slept. The ticking of the old hallway clock had replaced her phone alarm, and for the first time in years she woke without a message from Daniel. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence. She wrapped herself in a cardigan and stepped into the kitchen. Arthur was already awake. He sat at the table with a cup of black tea, his hands trembling slightly, a leather-bound notebook open in front of him. The sight stopped her. "That's not a journal, is it?" Lydia asked carefully. Arthur smiled faintly. "No. Journals are for memories people want to keep. This," he tapped the cover, "is for things people tried to erase." She sat across from him. Inside the notebook were dates, times, short, precise sentences written in a steady hand that betrayed none of the weakness of his body. March 3rd. Missed insulin dose. Daniel said pharmacy delay. I called. Prescription was never sent. April 19th. Elaine cancelled oncology appointment. Said I looked fine. June 2nd. Bank withdrawal. $12,400. Daniel claimed home repairs. No repairs done. Lydia's breath caught. "You've been keeping records," she whispered. "For 14 months, Arthur said. Long enough to know this wasn't neglect. It was strategy." The word hung heavy between them. Strategy. Arthur closed the notebook slowly. "They believed my body made me powerless. That illness turned me into a problem instead of a person." Lydia felt something shift inside her. Not anger alone, but clarity. She thought of the cruise photos Daniel had posted once before deleting them. Champagne glasses. White linen dinners. A caption that read family first. Family. "I helped them," Lydia said suddenly, her voice cracking. "I believed them. Every time they said you were difficult. Every time they said you were confused." Arthur looked at her for a long moment. "Belief can be weaponized," he said gently. "That doesn't make you the weapon." Silence returned, but it was different now. Heavier. Sharper. Later that morning, Arthur asked her to help organize the documents. Not just the notebook but folders, medical records with handwritten annotations, bank statements highlighted in yellow, printed emails where appointments had been rescheduled again and again, even voicemail transcripts. Daniel's voice dismissive, rushed, irritated. Lydia worked for hours without realizing it. She scanned, labeled, chronologized, and as she did, a pattern emerged so clear it made her stomach twist. Every major withdrawal followed a medical setback. Every cancelled appointment coincided with a family trip. Every excuse was rehearsed. "This is elder abuse," Lydia said finally, sitting back. Arthur nodded. "Yes. And financial exploitation." He reached for a second folder, thinner, locked with a small brass clasp. "These," he said, "are the things they don't know exist." Inside were documents Lydia had never seen before. Property deeds, trust statements, legal correspondence with an address in Geneva, another in the Cayman Islands. Her eyes widened. "Arthur, this is enough," he finished. "Enough that their assumptions will become their downfall." He leaned back, exhausted but alert. "They believed I was dying without defenses," he said. "But I built them quietly. Years ago. For this exact reason." Lydia's mind raced. Daniel had told her repeatedly that Arthur's estate was simple. That there was nothing left after medical costs. That the cruise was a final family memory before things get worse. It had all been a lie. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lydia froze. Arthur raised a hand. "It's all right. It's Mrs. Feldman from next door. Tuesdays she brings soup." True enough, the elderly neighbor entered with a warm smile and a casserole dish. "I didn't know anyone was staying with you, Arthur," she said kindly. Then, lowering her voice, "It's good to see someone here." After she left, Arthur looked at Lydia. "She's visited more in 6 months than my own son," he said quietly. That afternoon, Arthur made a request that changed everything. "I want you to meet my attorney." Lydia blinked. Your attorney? Patricia Hale. She's handled my affairs for 20 years. She knows what's coming. What do you mean, what's coming? Lydia asked, though she already sensed the answer. Arthur's gaze drifted to the window. My time is shorter than Daniel knows, he said. And I won't let the truth die with me. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. That night, Lydia lay awake replaying everything. The empty house. The cruise. The notebook. The hidden assets. And finally, the realization that chilled her most. Daniel hadn't just abandoned her. He had used her. Used her presence to justify absence. Used her trust to cover theft. Used her silence to continue cruelty. At exactly 2:17 a.m. her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Hey, everything okay there? Dad behaving? Cruise Wi-Fi is spotty. He stared at the screen. Then slowly she typed back. He's fine. Getting stronger every day. She turned the phone face down. For the first time since Thanksgiving, Lydia wasn't waiting to be chosen. She was choosing. If you're still here with this story, thank you for listening. Stories like this unfold slowly, but the truth always leaves clues. Backhand index pointing right if this chapter pulled you in. Subscribe to Hidden Life Story so you don't miss what comes next. Speech balloon, and in the comments tell us, at this point, who do you trust least and why? By the fifth morning, the house had changed its posture. It no longer felt abandoned, it felt alert, like a courtroom before a verdict. Light streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes that floated lazily in the air, and for the first time since Layla had arrived, the silence felt purposeful rather than cruel. Layla sat at the long dining table with a legal pad open, her pen moving in neat, decisive lines. Across from her, Armin watched quietly, his thin fingers folded over a leather-bound folder that had clearly been opened and closed 1,000 times. The man's body continued to betray him. His hands trembled, his breath shortened, but his mind was razor-sharp. That was the paradox that kept Layla awake at night. How someone so physically diminished could be so mentally unbreakable. This is everything, Armin said at last, sliding the folder toward her. Every receipt, every cancelled appointment, every bank transfer. Dates, times, names. Layla opened the folder and felt a chill crawl up her spine. This wasn't chaos. This was pattern. Bank statements showed withdrawals that aligned perfectly with luxury purchases. Medical records revealed appointments scheduled, then mysteriously cancelled, always by someone else. Pharmacy logs showed prescriptions refilled late, doses reduced without authorization. Each page was a quiet accusation. They didn't just forget you, Layla whispered. They engineered this. Armin nodded once. Neglect is easier to deny when it looks accidental. They worked in silence for hours, building a timeline so precise it felt like a spine forming under the story. Layla's background in design became unexpectedly useful. She organized the documents into visual sequences, color-coded and indexed, transforming pain into clarity. It was the first time she'd ever felt that order could be an act of rebellion. Around noon, the doorbell rang. They froze. Armin's eyes flicked to the hallway camera monitor. It'll be Soraya, he said calmly. The neighbor. She brings soup when she thinks no one is watching. Layla opened the door to find a woman in her late 60s, wrapped in a wool coat despite the mild weather. Soraya's eyes softened with relief when she saw someone finally standing in the doorway. I was worried, Soraya said gently. The lights were off for days. Inside, Soraya set the soup on the counter and glanced at Armin with a mixture of affection and restrained anger. I told your son you needed help. He smiled. Said everything was handled. Layla met Armin's gaze. Slowly, carefully, she took out her phone. Would you mind, she asked Soraya, telling us what you saw? Soraya didn't hesitate. She spoke of days when Armin had sat alone on the porch, coatless in the cold. Of delivery drivers who rang repeatedly because no one came to the door. Of arguments overheard through thin walls, voices sharp with impatience, not concern. Layla recorded every word, labeling the file as Soraya spoke. When Soraya left, the house felt heavier, but also stronger. By late afternoon, the evidence had grown into something undeniable. Layla leaned back in her chair, exhaustion tugging at her shoulders. They'll say you manipulated me, she said quietly. That I did this for money. Armin smiled faintly. They always confuse kindness with greed. It makes their conscience quieter. He pushed another envelope across the table, this one thinner, sealed. This is for Parvana, he said, naming his attorney. She's already preparing the documents. Trust revisions. Medical authority. Everything. Layla swallowed. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. As evening fell, they staged what Armin called a necessary illusion. Medical equipment, oxygen tanks, monitors, were arranged carefully, visible enough to suggest urgency without deception. Layla adjusted lighting and angles, photographing Armin in a way that told the truth without exaggeration. A proud man facing a failing body. They sent one image. Just one. Within minutes, Armin's phone buzzed. His daughter. Armin didn't answer. He let it ring, the sound echoing like a metronome counting down consequences. Quick pause, dear viewer. If stories about hidden betrayals, quiet strength, and justice that unfolds slowly but powerfully resonate with you, consider subscribing to Hidden Life Story. Your support helps us tell stories that don't shout, but stay with you long after they end. Yellow Heart. That night, Layla lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of the woman she had been a week ago, expecting a holiday, trusting love blindly. And the woman she was becoming now. Someone who saw clearly, acted carefully, and refused to be erased. Down the hall, Armin coughed softly. Layla rose and found him sitting by the window, moonlight outlining his profile. Do you regret it? She asked. Cutting them out? Armin shook his head. Regret is for those who had better options. I'm choosing dignity. The next morning brought a visitor neither of them expected. A man in a gray suit stood at the door, holding a leather briefcase and a look of professional restraint. I'm Reza, he said. From the bank. Inside, Reza confirmed what Armin had warned her about. Unauthorized access attempts, forged signatures, pressure disguised as concern. Your family assumed, Reza said carefully, that time was on their side. Armin's smile was thin. Time is neutral. People misuse it. By noon, the final transfer was scheduled. Assets moved into trusts, protections locked in place. Layla watched the confirmations appear one by one, each notification a door closing softly but permanently. Later, as the house settled into quiet again, Armin handed Layla a small key. I study, he said. There's a letter there. Not for today. For when you doubt yourself. Layla wrapped her fingers around the key, feeling its weight. I won't forget this, she said. Any of it. Armin looked at her, eyes steady. That's all I ask. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. Shadows that no longer felt threatening but honest. The reckoning was approaching. And this time it would arrive prepared. The house had learned a new rhythm. Quiet, deliberate, almost reverent. Every sound carried meaning now. The kettle's low hum at dawn, the soft click of pills arranged into a daily box, the measured footsteps that crossed the hallway like a promise not to rush what time itself was already taking. Lala moved through the rooms with care, as if the walls were listening. In the weeks since their pact, she and Kurash had become an unlikely pair bound by resolve. What began as strategy had grown into stewardship. Each morning, Lala checked the calendar taped inside a cupboard door. Appointments kept, medications taken, calls logged. Each afternoon she scanned bank statements and emails, saving copies to a folder named Truth. Each evening she sat beside Kurash's armchair and read aloud from his old books, letting familiar words stitch the hours together. Yet beneath the calm lay a pressure that would not ease. Kurash's family had gone silent. No calls. No texts. No visits. Silence can be merciful, but this silence felt rehearsed. Felt like waiting. Silence, Kurash said one afternoon, breaking it, is how people hide from their conscience. He was thinner now, his hands translucent in the light, veins like blue threads beneath paper skin. But his eyes remained sharp. He watched Lala not as a patient watches a caretaker, but as a general watches a trusted lieutenant. They're hoping it resolves itself, he continued. That time will do the work, they won't. Lala closed her laptop. Time doesn't absolve neglect. A flicker of a smile crossed his face. No. People say that because they need to believe it. That evening a knock came at the door. Lala felt it before she heard it. A tightening in her chest, a subtle warning from the quiet itself. She opened the door to find Shaheen, Kurash's nephew, standing on the porch with a forced grin and a paper bag in his hands. "Thought I'd drop by," Shaheen said, eyes already scanning past her into the house. "Just checking in." The bag held supermarket bread and a bouquet that still wore its price sticker. Gestures designed to be seen, not felt. Kurash greeted him from the living room with polite restraint. Shaheen stayed 10 minutes. He asked shallow questions. He avoided the files on the desk. He spoke about traffic, about weather, about a cousin's new job. When he left, he patted Kurash's shoulder and said, "We'll all catch up soon." After the door closed, Kurash exhaled. "That," he said quietly, "was reconnaissance." That night Lala logged the visit. Date. Behavior. She added a note. First contact after silence. Performative concern. The next day brought worse. An email arrived from Perviz, Kurash's son-in-law, requesting access to updated medical records for insurance purposes. The language was formal, legal-sounding. Lala forwarded it to Miriam, the attorney, without reply. Miriam called within the hour. "They're circling," she said. "This is the phase where they try to look responsible on paper." "What do we do?" Lala asked. "We do nothing we haven't planned. And we document everything." The house returned to its quiet, but it was no longer innocent. Every pause felt charged. Every ring of the phone sharpened the air. In the middle of the week, Kurash asked for peaches. "Fresh," he said. "If you can find them." It was late in the season. Lala drove across town, stopping at markets until she found a small crate with the right color, sun-warm, faintly fragrant. She peeled them carefully at home, sliced them thin, added cream the way he remembered. When she brought the bowl, his eyes closed for a moment. "My wife," he said softly. "She used to make this on days we pretended were ordinary." They ate in silence, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. Later that night, as Lala organized files, she noticed something new. A small charge on one of the known accounts. A test transaction. Not large. Just enough to see if the door was still unlocked. Her stomach tightened. She called the bank manager the next morning. The account was frozen within minutes. By afternoon the calls began. First from Elahi, Kurash's daughter, voicemail only. Then from Shaheen again, his tone clipped now. Then from an unknown number that left no message. Kurash listened to the phone ring and ring, then nodded once. They've realized the ground has shifted. That evening Lala did something she hadn't planned. She set up the camera. Not to deceive but to preserve. She asked Kurash simple questions. His full name. The date. The names of his children. He answered clearly, patiently. Then she asked him to speak freely. He did. He spoke of appointments cancelled without his consent. Of medications altered. Of promises made and broken. He spoke calmly, without bitterness, as if he were filing a report on weather patterns rather than his own abandonment. When he finished, the room felt heavier but truer. "If they ever say I didn't know my own mind," he said, "this will answer them." That night Lala sat alone in the kitchen, replaying the recording once. Her reflection in the dark window looked older than she felt. If you're watching this story unfold and feel the tension tightening, thank you for staying with it. Stories like this are not about villains alone. They are about choices made in quiet rooms. If you value narratives that peel back hidden lives, subscribe to Hidden Life Story and explore the chapters that come next. The following morning brought a letter. Handwritten. Slipped under the door. It accused Lale of manipulation. It warned of legal action. It demanded access. Kurash read it once, folded it carefully and placed it atop the file marked Truth. "They're done pretending," he said. Outside, the sky shifted toward rain. Inside, the house held steady, no longer just a place of waiting, but a fortress built of records, resolve, and a bond forged under pressure. And somewhere beyond the door, the family prepared their next move. When the old house in the outskirts of the city fell silent that night, it seemed as if the shadows themselves were holding their breath. Moonlight spilled through the tall, heavy-curtained windows, casting elongated shadows across the worn wooden floors. Liana, a young woman recently moved into the house, hesitated as she stepped into the dim hallway. Her heart raced, not just with fear but with the anticipation of discovering something that would soon change her life forever. Just as she reached the second floor, A shocking and completely unexpected moment jolted her to a halt. Tucked away in her late grandfather George Davis's private study, she found an unopened envelope, yellowed with age and sealed for over a decade. Inside lay a letter detailing family betrayals, financial deceit, and secrets no one had known, secrets that could upend everything she thought she knew about her family. Holding the letter in trembling hands, Liana realized she now possessed the key to truths long buried. This moment was the pivotal advantage for both her and the viewers. She held the evidence and nothing would ever be the same again. She began reading, uncovering how her father's half-brother Marcus Davis and his wife Helena had siphoned off decades of George's wealth under the guise of care. They had manipulated accounts, drained joint savings, and indulged in lavish vacations and luxuries, all while claiming to act in George's best interest. Every note, every meticulous entry in George's journals and ledgers was proof of long-term abuse. Dates, amounts, and descriptions left no room for denial. Liana knew that if she could organize these documents correctly, even a court would recognize the undeniable truth. If I handle this correctly, justice won't just be served for my grandfather. It will ensure that anyone trying to escape accountability will pay the consequences. Later that night, she was not alone in her mission. Madame Claire, a sharp-witted elderly neighbor who had witnessed Marcus and Helena's manipulations for years, arrived with her own set of evidence. Phone logs, suspicious correspondence, and eyewitness accounts that added credibility to the claims. For the first time, Liana felt a true ally in this fight. They formed a quiet but unbreakable alliance, determined to expose the truth, even if it meant risking everything. With Madame Claire's testimonies and Liana's graphic design skills, they began compiling the evidence into a meticulously organized digital dossier. Every document, every photograph, and every note was catalogued with precision, ensuring that the story of betrayal and neglect would be impossible to dismiss. This preparation was more than organization. It was a weapon of justice in the making. At this point, a brief pause to thank you, the viewer, is in order. Glowing Star, thank you for sticking with Hidden Life Story. If you're enjoying this journey, make sure to subscribe and explore more of our videos. You won't want to miss the twist still to come. As Liana sifted through the papers late into the night, her eyes fell upon something that stopped her breath. A cryptic code hidden in the margins of one ledger. It hinted at a secret international account that Marcus and Helena had never disclosed. A fortune in the millions, untouchable and completely hidden. Liana's mind raced. This discovery could unravel the entire family's schemes, but it also posed a danger. How could she expose the truth without risking herself? The night ended with a mixture of dread and resolve. Liana realized that her next steps would determine not just the legacy of her grandfather, but her own fate in a house full of secrets, lies, and long-hidden betrayals. Late the next morning, the house was alive with an uneasy stillness, as if every creak of the floorboards whispered secrets of the past. Liana and Madame Claire moved silently through the rooms, their footsteps deliberate, hearts pounding with both fear and determination. They had a plan now, a risky, meticulous plan, to uncover the hidden offshore accounts that Marcus and Helena had gone to great lengths to conceal. With her laptop open and spreadsheets meticulously organized, Liana traced every transaction, cross-referencing old bank statements, coded ledgers, and correspondence. Each clue revealed another layer of deception. Marcus had been funneling money into accounts under false company names, while Helena maintained a facade of dutiful care, hiding luxurious vacations and extravagant purchases from the rest of the family. "This is bigger than I imagined," Liana whispered, eyes scanning a particularly troubling document. "They've controlled everything for years, but these codes, these are their weak points." Madame Claire nodded gravely, her gaze steady. "We have what we need to make them accountable. But we have to be careful. One wrong move and they'll bury this all forever." Hours passed and the tension in the room thickened. Liana's phone buzzed. A text from a neighbor who had noticed Marcus leaving the house unusually early, carrying a briefcase with suspicious urgency. Liana's pulse quickened. It was a small lead, but in a case this intricate, small leads were everything. Using this information, they staged a subtle surveillance setup, capturing movements without arousing suspicion. Liana's graphic design and tech skills came into play, ensuring every piece of evidence was not only documented but visually compelling. They were creating a story too clear to ignore, one that combined hard proof with undeniable patterns of deceit. At this point, Liana paused, taking a deep breath and glancing at the camera she had set up for recording their progress. Glowing Star, thank you so much for watching Hidden Life Story. Your support means everything. If you haven't already, subscribe and check out our other stories. The twists are only getting bigger from here, and you'll want to be with us every step of the way. Night fell again, and the house seemed to shiver under the weight of unspoken truths. Liana and Madame Claire worked tirelessly, piecing together the financial maze. They discovered that Marcus had left a trail of digital breadcrumbs, emails, backup files, and transaction logs, that when combined revealed the exact location of the hidden accounts. The revelation was staggering. Millions of dollars had been amassed without anyone else in the family knowing, and Helena had been complicit every step of the way. But with this discovery came danger. Liana understood that confronting Marcus and Helena prematurely could jeopardize everything. She had to craft the perfect plan, one that ensured the law, evidence, and community support would stand firmly on her side. Every step needed precision, courage, and timing. As the chapter of the night closed, Liana and Madame Claire shared a quiet moment of determination. "We're close," Madame Claire said, her voice steady. "One more step and justice won't just be possible, it will be inevitable." The story was far from over. Liana knew that the coming days would test her in ways she had never imagined, forcing her to balance fear with strategy, patience with urgency, and courage with caution. And somewhere deep inside she felt the stirring of empowerment, the power to turn betrayal into justice and secrecy into truth. The next morning, Liana woke to a sharp light slicing through the curtains, the quiet hum of the city outside a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside the walls of the house. She felt a knot of anticipation tighten in her chest as she reviewed the evidence one last time. Emails, transaction logs, photographs, and meticulously organized spreadsheets. Every piece had been cross-verified, every trail double-checked. Marcus and Helena had no idea how close she was to uncovering them. She called Madame Claire, her voice low but steady. "Today we confront them. But we do it smart. No mistakes." By late afternoon, Marcus and Helena returned, unsuspecting, laughing as though their secrets were safe. The moment they stepped inside, Liana and Madame Claire were ready. Liana's laptop sat open on the dining table, spreadsheets and evidence displayed like a visual map of betrayal. "Marcus, Helena," Liana began, her tone calm yet unwavering, "we need to talk about the accounts you thought were hidden forever." Marcus froze, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Helena's smile faltered, a trace of guilt creeping into her eyes. "I suggest you sit down," Liana continued, clicking through emails and showing screenshots of transactions that traced every misused dollar. The evidence was clear. Offshore accounts, falsified invoices, lavish expenses hidden under false pretenses. Marcus and Helena exchanged panicked glances, their facade of control cracking under the weight of the undeniable proof. "How did you get these?" Marcus finally stammered, his voice tight. "I followed the trail you left," Liana said, her eyes locking onto his. "Every move you made, every transfer, every manipulation, it's all documented. And I have the law on my side." Helena's hands shook slightly as she realized the depth of exposure. Madame Claire stepped forward, her presence commanding. "This is more than just about money. This is about accountability, honesty, and the lives you've disrupted. Your decisions have consequences, and it's time to face them." Liana paused and turned to the camera set discreetly in the corner, pressing record. She wanted to capture everything, the raw reactions, the admissions, the tension. This would be crucial for the legal steps ahead. Glowing Star, before we continue, I want to thank every one of you watching Hidden Life Story right now. Your support keeps these stories alive. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and explore our other stories. You won't believe the twists coming next. The confrontation intensified as Marcus tried to deflect, claiming miscommunication and misunderstanding, while Helena attempted to minimize her role. But Liana had anticipated this. She systematically dismantled every excuse, presenting financial evidence, text communications, and witness statements that left no room for denial. Finally, Marcus's shoulders slumped, a resigned heaviness overtaking his earlier arrogance. "Fine," he muttered. "You've got everything." "It's not just about having it," Liana said quietly. It's about using it responsibly and making amends. And you'll answer for the neglect and the lies you've inflicted. The room fell silent for a moment, each person absorbing the gravity of what had just unfolded. Liana and Madame Claire shared a brief glance of solidarity. They were on the cusp of not just exposing secrets but reshaping the narrative of betrayal and justice that had haunted this family for years. Night crept in, and with it the sense that nothing would ever be the same. Liana knew the coming days would demand more courage and strategy, but she also sensed a shift. Control was finally tilting toward truth, and the walls of deception Marcus and Helena had built for years were beginning to crumble. The following morning, the house was quiet, but the air buzzed with the tension of what was about to unfold. Liana had arranged for a small team of legal advisors and witnesses to arrive, ensuring that everything from the financial transfers to the testimony of the community would be fully documented and indisputable. Each step was meticulous, every detail scrutinized to prevent any loophole that Marcus or Helena might exploit. Liana took a deep breath and reviewed the checklist one last time. She felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. This was more than justice. It was closure, the final chapter of betrayal that had haunted her for months. As the legal team and witnesses began to arrive, Marcus and Helena appeared increasingly nervous. Their earlier arrogance had been replaced with a palpable anxiety, their attempts to feign normalcy collapsing under the weight of scrutiny. Liana greeted everyone calmly, directing each person to their roles. Photographers, notaries, and financial auditors were ready, cameras discreetly positioned to capture every reaction. The process began with Marcus and Helena being asked to acknowledge specific transactions and decisions that had been hidden from all but Liana. Each piece of evidence was presented systematically: emails, bank statements, falsified invoices, and witness testimonies from employees and neighbors. Liana's meticulous organization left them no room for denial. "You see, Marcus," Liana said, her voice steady, "every step you took has been recorded and every attempt to manipulate the accounts has been documented. There's no room left for excuses." Helena, her voice trembling, added, We didn't think anyone would notice." "That's the problem," Liana replied softly but firmly. "You assumed no one cared, that deception could continue without consequence. But truth has a way of finding its path, and today it has caught up with you." The notaries and legal advisors guided Marcus and Helena through signing documents that formally transferred control of all disputed assets to trusts benefiting the rightful heirs and charitable causes. Each signature was precise, binding, and recorded in real time, leaving no ambiguity or future challenge possible. Witnesses were called upon to testify, recounting instances of neglect and financial manipulation. Edith Peterson, the neighbor who had been instrumental earlier, described in vivid detail the neglect she had observed, from cancelled medical appointments to lack of basic care. Each statement strengthened Liana's case, reinforcing the moral and legal imperative for Marcus and Helena to relinquish control. Throughout the process, Liana kept her composure, though inside she felt a swell of vindication. She knew that this was the moment where years of manipulation and betrayal would be confronted head-on. The room was heavy with tension, yet each action, each signed document, brought a sense of triumph not only to Liana but to the truth itself. By late afternoon, the legal team had finalized every detail. The assets were secure, the evidence fully documented, and the family's attempts at concealment rendered powerless. Marcus and Helena sat quietly, the weight of reality pressing down on them as they realized that their schemes had failed. Glowing Star, if you're watching Hidden Life Story right now, thank you for staying with us through this intense journey. Remember to subscribe and check out other stories. You won't believe the twists and turns waiting for you. Also, leave a comment below sharing the moment you felt most connected to Liana or the story. Your thoughts make these stories come alive. As night fell, Liana felt an unexpected calm. The confrontation had ended, justice had been served, and the path forward was clear. Marcus and Helena's power had been dismantled, and the narrative that once belonged to them was now firmly in the hands of truth and integrity. Yet even in the quiet, Liana knew that the final emotional resolution, the closure of relationships, the understanding of betrayal, and the healing of those hurt, was still unfolding. And she was ready to see it through, determined to ensure that honesty and compassion would guide the next chapter of her life. Here's the continuation and conclusion of the story with 5th, 11th and 12th chapters merged into a smooth narrative, written in the same immersive style as the previous chapters. The days that followed the legal confrontation were surprisingly quiet. Liana moved through the house with a sense of purpose and reflection, the weight of recent events pressing upon her yet tempered by the clarity of justice served. The community support that had rallied behind her offered comfort, and the neighbors who had borne witness to Marcus and Helena's deception often stopped by, sharing memories, reassurance, and sometimes small acts of kindness. A warm meal, a cheerful wave, a quiet chat over tea. It was in these small human moments that Liana realized the depth of connection and trust that had been missing in her life before this ordeal. She spent hours reviewing the documents, ensuring that every clause, every trust transfer, and every charitable allocation was precisely executed. The hidden assets that Marcus had assumed he controlled were now legally untouchable, and the charities that had been chosen to benefit from these transfers would serve as enduring proof of integrity and care. Liana often thought of Victor and his quiet strength. His foresight and meticulous documentation had been the spark that enabled all of this. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the trust he had placed in her, and she wanted to honor his legacy by not only securing the estate but by living in a way that reflected his values. Evenings were filled with reflection and quiet rituals. Liana would play classical music in the background, sometimes lighting a single candle in memory of Victor. She prepared the meals he had loved, simple dishes, fresh fruit, soft bread, finding comfort in their symbolism and in the act of caring that had once been her shared duty with him. There was sadness, of course, a lingering ache for the moments they had shared and the closure that could never fully undo the pain of betrayal. But there was also empowerment. Liana recognized how much she had grown, how she had discovered resilience, resourcefulness, and courage within herself that she had never tapped into before. One afternoon, as she prepared notes for a follow-up discussion with Patricia Winters, Victor's attorney, Liana received an unexpected letter. It was from Marcus, written in a tone that oscillated between apology and desperation. He admitted to his failures, acknowledged the hurt he had caused, and for the first time, seemed to grasp the magnitude of the harm he had inflicted, not only financially but emotionally. Liana read the words carefully, not with vengeance in mind but with clarity. She responded with a measured note, affirming that justice had been served, that any personal reconciliation would require genuine change over time, and that the past could not be undone but could be learned from. In the coming weeks, Liana dedicated time to sharing her story in measured, deliberate ways, ensuring that others who might face similar betrayals or elder neglect could see a path forward. She collaborated with local charities, assisted in documenting cases of abuse, and spoke with neighbors and community leaders about vigilance, compassion, and the power of accountability. It was an unexpected role for her, but one that brought deep fulfillment. Through her advocacy, she felt that Victor's quiet voice would continue to resonate, amplifying lessons of integrity, courage, and care. The final day of the story's unfolding arrived with a sense of stillness. Liana sat by the window in her sunlit living room, watching the snow fall softly, blanketing the world in a quiet peace. She thought of the journey, the shock of betrayal, the meticulous uncovering of lies, the confrontations, the courtroom-like proceedings, and the delicate human moments of connection and grief. She had survived, she had grown, and she had emerged not only victorious but profoundly transformed. As night fell, she wrote a final letter to the community, sharing lessons learned, acknowledging those who had supported her and encouraging vigilance, empathy, and courage in the face of adversity. She emphasized that true strength often comes not from confrontation alone, but from care, resilience, and the determination to uphold truth, even when it seems easier to remain silent. Glowing Star, if you've been following this story on Hidden Life Story, thank you for watching and staying with us through every twist and turn. Don't forget to subscribe, explore our other stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. What moment touched you most? Was there a character you related to deeply or a scene that made your heart race? We'd love to hear from you. The house was finally quiet, but it was not empty. The legacy of truth, justice, and compassion lingered in every corner, every room, every thoughtful gesture. Liana knew that while the chapter of betrayal had closed, the story of life, resilience, and human connection would continue, written not only in legal documents and community records but in the quiet, enduring power of personal courage. The snow outside glistened under the moonlight, a silent reminder that even after storms, the world could still be beautiful, hopeful, and full of promise. And as Liana closed the final page on the past, she felt a deep sense of closure and readiness to embrace the next chapter of her life, unburdened, empowered, and at peace.